Back to order. I would like to welcome the Honorable Bill Blair, Minister of National Defence, to Procedure and House Affairs Committee. Minister Blair, you have up to 10 minutes for your opening comments. The floor is yours. You can give me back any free time, and I would welcome it.
Madam Chair, I'll do my very best to make very brief comments. I know that the committee has a number of questions, and first of all, let me begin by thanking you and thanking the committee for the invitation to appear again on this study. And as I've said, I will endeavour to be brief in my remarks. As I have said before at this committee, no parliamentarian or their family should ever be threatened for advocating for their beliefs. It is utterly unacceptable that any member of parliament from any party that might be the target of intimidation, if there is evidence of a threat of violence or intimidation against any Canadian, it is critical that it be referred immediately to police for further action and to the safety of those individuals as quickly as possible. And as I testified in June, I first learned about the threats made against the member for Wellington Halton Hills when they were published in the Globe and Mail on May 1st. These were serious claims and particularly disturbing as they named both the member and his family. It was my clear expectation as the Minister of Public Safety at that time that CSIS would brief me on all threats to our democratic institutions. And however, unfortunately, I was never informed of any attempt by any foreign actor to harm a parliamentarian or threats against their loved ones. If there was sensitive information CSIS wanted to transmit to me, my expectation was the director or his team would request a briefing. I would then attend a secure facility either in Ottawa or Toronto, and it was the responsibility of officials that had access to the top secret network to provide information which would then be printed and presented for my review during these meetings. If I may be very clear, there is no such secure terminal located in the Minister's office. Neither I nor any of my staff had login credentials to that system. Any suggestion that this was a matter of simply not opening emails is frankly absurd, because top secret secure information is not transmitted as an email. It's rather sent to a secure terminal, the only secure terminal at 269 Laurier, which is where my office as Public Safety Minister was located, was not located on the political minister's office, but rather on in the Deputy Minister's side of the building, and no one in my staff, including myself, had any access to that terminal. To keep Canadians safe, intelligence must be shared and disseminated so that it can be acted upon. The committee has heard testimony from senior officials, including the National Security and Intelligence Advisor, who have acknowledged a failure in how intelligence was shared with and between ministers and departments. To begin to address this, the former Minister of Public Safety issued a ministerial directive to CSIS requiring them to inform, thank you very much, to inform the Minister in all instances of threats to the security of Canada directed at Parliament or to parliamentarians in a timely manner. It is also why the Prime Minister has created the National Security Council as a committee of cabinet. Foreign interference has been a significant threat to Canadian interests since before this government was elected and has only become more serious in recent years. This is a nonpartisan issue. It is why we established the public inquiry into foreign interference after reaching consensus from among all parties on the terms of reference. It is my sincere hope that by looking at the hostile activities of all state actors, including China, of course, and others, that this Commission will provide us with the recommendations to build upon the important work that is already underway. We must continue to review these matters in a way that respects our national security obligations, including those who put their lives at risk collecting intelligence on our behalf in the field. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I look forward to any questions the committee may have.
Thank you, Minister Blair. Your comments are coming in at 3 minutes and 28 seconds, so I appreciate you being short with those comments so that we can actually get to comments and questions. We will now have a 6-minute round, starting with Mr. Coper, followed by Mrs. Romanado, suivi par Madame Goudreau, et puis Madame Blaney. 6 minutes through the chair. As we know, we've had a first hour of committee business. We all know how that went. So I would just say, mindful to all committee members, you know what the expectations of this committee are. So through the chair, interpreters can only interpret one person at a time. We are dealing with a really important study, which is the question of privilege for the member for Wellington Halton Hills. and other members in regards to a very serious matter. So I hope we all take note of that. Mr. Cooper, through the chair, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Minister, when you last appeared before this committee on June 1st, you made the incredible assertion that with regards to the May 2021 CSIS Issues Management Note that warned that MP Michael Chong and his family in Hong Kong were being targeted by the Beijing regime, including an accredited diplomat at Beijing's Toronto consulate, that, quote, CSIS quite appropriately made a determination they didn't believe it was necessary to pass that information along, end of quote, which you characterized as, quote, an operational decision, end of quote. Your testimony, Minister, is directly contradicted by the director of CSIS, David Vinot, who on June 13th told this committee that no such operational decision had been made, that the issues management note, distinct from other intelligence memos, pertains to a matter of high importance, and that in regards to you, Minister, quote, I think the fact that we did an issue management note speaks to the notion that we wanted to highlight the information, end of quote. So, Minister, through you, Madam Chair, can you explain why your testimony was flatly contradicted by the director of CSIS?
Well, with great respect, it was not contradicted, and in fact, I sincerely believe that it was the director's intent that that information be made available to me. Unfortunately, the steps were not taken by CSIS or by the Department of Public Safety to make that information available to me. I had no way of knowing that they had a secret that they wanted to tell me. And under every other circumstances, and I was the Minister of Public Safety for over 2 years, under every other circumstances, the director of CSIS would advise my office that they had information to brief me on. He would, thank you, Madam Chair. He would advise my office that they had information that they wished to share with me. I would then go to a secure room where that information was shared. On some other circumstances, I was actually asked to attend the CSIS office in Toronto, where that information would be briefed to me. But that did not take place in this circumstance.
I understand what you're now saying, but you said it was the intent of the director of CSIS that information be shared with you. That's not what you said on June 1st. Minister, you used very specific language that the director, that being the director of CSIS, determined that this was not information the minister needed to know. Those were your expressed words, and that it was an operational decision not to pass that information on to you. That's very different than saying that there was an intent to pass it along to you. What you're saying now is the opposite of what you said on June 1st. So why did you use that very specific language when you evidently knew that it simply wasn't true based upon what you're saying today?
And respectfully, Mr. Cooper, I listened to the testimony that Director Vigneault gave before this committee after my testimony. I heard him very clearly say that it was his intent. And I know Director Vigneault very well. He's a very decent man, and I've worked with him for many years, and I trust him. However, I would point out that he, unfortunately, notwithstanding his maybe perhaps good intentions to share that, he did not take the steps that were necessary to ensure that that information was actually brought to my attention. And under every other circumstances, the director would notify my office, and he would come and either brief me personally or ask that I attend at the CSIS office in Toronto to have that information shared. That did not take place at that time. I assumed, and by the way, there's a great deal of information that CSIS comes in possession of, and they make determinations as to its validity and usefulness.
You said,
and I assume that when they chose that they did not share it with me,
Minister, I've given you some time to answer. You're repeating yourself. Minister, you said that it was your expectation that matters of national security, such as that impacting MP Chong and his family, would be brought to your attention. Well, it was also the director of CSIS's expectation that when a top secret issues management note on a matter of high importance was sent to you, your deputy minister, and your chief of staff, that you would have seen that. So will you, Minister, at the very least concede that under your watch there was a colossal breakdown in communications that resulted in MP Chong being kept in the dark for 2 years and a Beijing thug allowed to stay in Canada for 2 years to continue his campaign of intimidation against Chinese Canadian citizens. Would you at the very least concede that there was a breakdown of communications under your watch as minister?
Well, Mr. Cooper, there are two things that are incorrect with what you have just said. First of all, that information was not sent to me, and it was not sent to my chief of staff. So you've incorrectly characterized that. No, it was sent to a secure terminal to which we do not have access. That is not the way in which top secret information was shared with the minister or the minister's office. It was shared more directly by the director, and that did not happen in these circumstances. So your characterization as that this information was sent to me is quite frankly incorrect. However, I would also acknowledge, as the National Security Intelligence Advisor acknowledged, and as I believe the director of CSIS acknowledged in this circumstance, that they did not do what was necessary to make sure that information was brought to the attention of the minister. And for that, I, as the Minister of Public Safety at the time, I do take responsibility for that, and we've taken steps to remedy that mishandling of that particular information and the failure to ensure that it got into the hands of people who needed to see it.
Thank you. Mrs. Romanato, 6 minutes through the chair.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and through you, I'd like to welcome the Minister back to Proc. Thank you so much, Minister, for being here. Last week, we had Mr. Rob Stewart present last Thursday at Proc with respect to the point of privilege, and he testified that the issues management note dated in May 2021 was not forwarded to you. He testified in that regard. We understand that Mr. Vigneault may have had this information, the intelligence. If at the end of the day it was not provided to you, it's pretty difficult to act on anything if it's not actually provided to you. I would like to give you a little bit more time to elaborate on from the time you came in June to see us to now. I know you've changed portfolios. I want to look ahead. What steps are we putting in place? You mentioned some steps that are being put in place to make sure this does not happen again, that in the event there is a threat to a sitting member of parliament, that it gets the right eyes in real time.
Thanks, Mr. Romanato. And first of all, I want to acknowledge and appreciate the testimony of Deputy Minister Stewart. He's absolutely correct. That information was not shared with me, as I have previously testified, and as I believe the director of CSIS has also testified. But we recognize that there is certain information that needs to be shared in a far more timely way. I was very concerned when I learned and reading in the Globe and Mail that a threat had been made against a member of Parliament and their families. And the reason I was very concerned about that is I think we all share a responsibility to make sure that the people that do our important work can do so safely. And had I been aware of that information, I would have insisted that very assertive steps be taken in order to provide that member with all the support and protection that they needed for themselves and for their families. I think that is our first priority, and frankly, that's what most concerned me. I can tell you that since becoming aware of this breakdown in information, and again, I'm not making an excuse for it, it's just simply an explanation. I was not aware that CSIS had a secret that they thought they should share. And I was never made aware that they had that information. And frankly, the most simple remedy for that is for someone at CSIS or the public safety to notify the minister that there's information that they needed to see and to actually get me into a secure location to do that. The new minister of public safety, Minister Mendicino, who succeeded me in that role, issued a ministerial directive that all such information should be and must be brought to the attention of the public safety minister. That is the first step. But I will also tell you, I now work in an area, Ms. Romanato, that deals with a lot of top secret and classified information. And I will tell you from my experience now as the Minister of National Defense that there is a very robust system. I am briefed by both Communications Security Establishment Chief and by the CDS and the commander of CAF Incom, the CAF's Intelligence Command, General Wright. I'm briefed on a weekly basis very comprehensively. In addition to that, if there is other information that needs to be brought to my attention, either the CDS, the Deputy Minister, the Chief of CSE, or even their CROs, which are people that are employed at CSE, deliver those documents even to my office in a secure environment, and that information is being shared on a very robust, very regular way. And most importantly, God bless the military, they are meticulously about their record keeping. And so every document that's put before me is recorded, the date and time, what was shared and who shared it. And that makes us all responsible for it. And I think it also remedies a situation that previously existed with CSIS. And then finally, I would also point out that the Prime Minister has now created a National Security Council. It's a cabinet of committee that will be very routinely briefed on top secret and classified material, not just so that the government can be aware of it, but so that action can be taken. And I think that's ultimately our responsibility in dealing with this classified material. It needs to be appropriately shared so that appropriate actions can be taken in response to it, such as the threat that was made against a member of Parliament. That needed to be actioned immediately, and it's important that situation be remedied. We've taken some very significant steps. And as you know, over the past several years, our government has taken a number of steps to improve oversight and accountability of national security matters, but we have seen very significant progress in the past few months.
Thank you so much. So, as you know, Minister, my son is an intelligence officer with Canadian Armed Forces, so I'm very versed on how intelligence is gathered and the importance of keeping issues of national intelligence in a confidential manner. You mentioned the fact that in your new role in national defense, you have the facilities necessary to be briefed appropriately on top secret matters. Would you recommend going forward? You mentioned in your previous portfolio of public safety that the minister's office does not have such facilities in terms of being able to be briefed, didn't have access to the terminal and so on and so forth. Would you recommend that perhaps the Minister of Public Safety also have something similar?
On the one hand, I believe in the security of such information. It's highly sensitive in its nature. It can affect our national interest and our national security. I would also be concerned, like frankly, when I read about leaks of top secret information, I'm deeply concerned by that because it can, if done as recklessly as sometimes it has been done, compromise and undermine the ability of those who risk their lives every day to collect information for us.
Thank you.
And so
Sorry,
their
Mr.
safety and the security of that
Minister?
information is also a priority for me.
Thank you. Just her first question was quite short. The answer was quite long, so I feel like it's only appropriate that I do move on to Madame Goudreau. 6 minutes parmi la présidence.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witness for coming back once again. I'll speak slowly, and I would also appreciate that the answer be given slowly to give our interpreters, who are doing exceptional work, to answer. So, to work, rather. So, through you, Madam Chair, first of all, thank you for the time that we have to allow us to see where we are at with this. Now, so my first question is very specific. Have we all read in the French paper this morning, did you see the proposal of the Bloc Québécois to table a bill for a registry of foreign agents? Did you read that this morning?
A reminder to speak slowly, and I will endeavor to do so because we do want to take care of the translators who do such an exceptional job for us. And I apologize. I have not yet had I was in cabinet this morning, and we've been rather busy since very early, and I have not yet seen the papers.
Bien, en fait, moi, je vous poserai la question parce que
Well, I would put the question to you. In the Bloc Québécois, we are concerned, as are you, Madam Chair. We don't want this to happen again. And with all of the recommendations we've heard over the preceding months, we have been awaiting this registry. But now, because this is not new, and with all of the expertise that you have, I'd like to know what you know of a foreign agent registry, because we've said we have to act and we have to find solutions. So what do you think of that?
A couple of things. First of all, I'm aware that a number of our allies also have foreign agent registries, and I know their value. And I believe that Canada would benefit from such a registry. I'm also aware that this is something that the public inquiry that has now been called will also look at, and I expect that there will be recommendations. I'm reluctant to comment on the Bloc bill, but I really look forward to reading it. I think we all believe and agree that a foreign registry would help protect Canada's interests, but it's also important that we do it in a thoughtful way.
Je vous remercie, Madame la Présidente. J'aimerais savoir.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would like to know, when there are recommendations that are made a high priority by many experts, how is it that the Bloc Québécois has to table a bill in order to pressure and push the government to act? Because as we speak, there are talks underway, but there's nothing official. So I'd like to hear you speak to that. And why have we not managed by this fall to do something?
And again, the actual work that is being done and continues to be done is important. But I think what you speak to, Madame Gaudreau, is the importance of Parliament and the importance of and the role of opposition to continue to strongly advocate and to bring forward and to bring pressure, quite frankly. And I think it's entirely appropriate that that's how government works, because I think we all are here to act in the best interests of Canadians. And I will tell you that this is a priority for our government. I know the Public Safety Minister has indicated his intention to bring this forward, but frankly, we welcome the advocacy of the Bloc. And also, if you have recommendations for a path forward, I look forward to reading it.
Je comprends. En fait,
I understand, and that reassures me, Madam Chair, because I have the blessing of the importance of being here, and we want to deal with these issues in Quebec. But in the meantime, it's also people at home who are victims of this. So what I understand is that not only have you not been given a date concerning the work that's been done by your predecessor, but at the same time, you were not prepared to table something in the meantime, and you're waiting to see now what the Bloc has done. So there wasn't a date as such. That was a process underway. Am I correct?
Clear. That's the work that's going on under Mr. LeBlanc at Public Safety, working very much in collaboration with a number of others. I have not been involved in that. Unfortunately, I'm not able to share with you either a date or the progress on that work, but I can tell you that I've been part of a number of discussions that talked about the importance of bringing forward a foreign agent registry and the legislation that would be required to do so.
ben, moi, c'est sûr que ça m'inquiète.
I'm very worried when I hear all of that, because as someone who's responsible for CSIS, Madam Chair, I wasn't aware, I didn't know anything about this subject, and everything that I've learned has shown me that in Canada, the intelligence culture is weak. We have perhaps made great progress, but when I go home, I can't tell my constituents anything to reassure them that we've taken this in hand. So I find that very sad as a comment, that today we are pushing for something that we all know needs to be done. So I'm just wondering, do you have too much work to do, or is it just not important enough?
We're busy, of course, but no, this is a priority. It's also a priority that we do it right. And so we're looking at the experience of other jurisdictions. There are extensive consultations. We're also aware that as a result of an all-party consensus, we've now appointed a public inquiry that's also going to be able to examine this issue and make recommendations. We think there's value in that public inquiry. We think there's value in what we have all agreed is the right thing to do, and it will inform the decisions that are made around all of our next steps, including a foreign agent registry.
Thank you. Merci. Mrs. Blaney, 6 minutes through the chair.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And of course, I appreciate the Minister being here today, and I congratulate him on his new role. And I will also remind him, as the representative of the 19 Wing, I have a lot of things to talk to you about through the chair, and really look forward to having those discussions to support some truly amazing people who serve our country. I guess my first question is, as I appreciate through your testimony, I've heard you say that the first you heard of this incident was reading it through the Globe and Mail. And I think probably what is even more shocking and horrifying for me is that Mr. Chong read it for the first time through the Globe and Mail. And I can't imagine finding out that myself and my family were under some sort of reality that was not clear at all, and to read it in the news is not the best way moving forward. So you said as well, they had a secret to tell me and I had no idea. So, and then you also talked about some of the things that are being done to remedy that. And I know you've talked about it before, but if you could just talk about what you felt was done to start to remedy that, and let us know what you left to the, now we're on another minister, but what you left behind to be completed so that this didn't happen again.
We don't leave it completely behind, Mrs. Blaney, but let me assure you, first of all, each successive minister, I think, has taken important steps and will continue to take important steps to make sure that our national security intelligence establishment is robust, that it's properly governed and subject to oversight, but that it is effective in providing and protecting Canada's national interests. The situation, first of all, when I first made aware, and you may recall that I actually sent a letter out in 2021 to all parliamentarians, bringing to their attention issues that frankly CSIS had brought to my attention about foreign interference, and particularly about the role of China. There was a 12-page letter that I tabled in Parliament and sent directly to all parliamentarians, making sure that this issue was brought to their attention. I was also advised by CSIS that there were a number of unnamed members of Parliament who could potentially be targeted. And I asked CSIS at that time about the importance of actually providing those members of Parliament with enough information so that they could be protected from the risk of being interfered with or being subject to interference. And so they advised me that they were undertaking a number of defensive briefings. I will tell you, they did not tell me who they were briefing or what they were briefing them on. I did not receive that information. I've subsequently learned, after the information appeared in the Globe and Mail about Mr. Chong, that CSIS had conducted a defensive briefing, but I understand some of the information that was made public in the Globe and Mail was not shared with Mr. Chong, and that's wrong. I also think that it was very important that if there were threats against any member or their families, that action had to be taken to make sure that they were safe and protected. And in response to that, the then Public Safety Minister, Mr. Mendicino, issued a ministerial directive to CSIS that all such information had to be shared. Additionally, there were steps taken.
Thank you, Minister. I really appreciate that. And I understand that Mr. Chong did get a defensive review. It did not give him the information about his family. I think it's important that we don't confuse the two. He's also been very clear that he feels that this is something that all MPs should receive, because having that information about how to be perceptive of how you might be being targeted really allowed him to have some tools in his toolkit to notice things, but it did not give him the information that he so desperately needed, which was poignant to him and his family actually being targeted. Now, I know that foreign interference in our elections is a ever expanding reality, and figuring out how to secure sharing processes, how to make sure the information is getting where it needs to get, and when it should get to that place is all something that is changing rapidly. I respect that. But I also am just very concerned that MPs could be targeted in a very personal way and not know that. And that means that there's no capacity, when you don't know, to actually deal with the issues. So you talked about how, as now in your new role as a minister of Defense that when you receive information, which you receive a lot more frequently now because of the work that you do. So I guess my question is, you talked about having information coming and doing a date received and a date read so that that is calculated and so that there's some sort of way of tracking how information, which I think is lacking in the study that we're doing right now on the motion of privilege. And I wonder, is it important for us to look with this new reality at having a more secure location for the Minister of Public Safety to get this information in a more secure way, but more rapidly, and have that accountability of a date received and a date read?
First of all, the actual facility, there are a number of what we call SCIFs around the city and across the country. These are secure locations where classified and even top secret material can be shared. There's a difference, by the way, between that level and even within the top secret realm. There are a number of levels and who has authority to see them. But there are secure facilities that can be done. There is a secure facility, by the way, at 269 Laurier, where it's a SCIF that's located and it's on the public safety, the public services side of that building. It's located on the 16th floor, and fairly routinely, I would be asked to go to that room to be briefed, usually by the director, almost always by the director of CSIS.
Thank you.
And his senior staff, and so the facility is an issue, but I think more importantly is appropriate. First of all, vigor in making
Thank
sure
you.
that actionable
I'm going to try a
intelligence is
third
shared
time,
in a
Minister
timely way.
Blair.
I'm filibustering on you, Chair. I'm sorry.
I would prefer not. So
Okay.
I'm going to go into the next round. Thank you for that. And I will just remind everyone that if we can try to keep our questions and answers about the same time, it would minimize you needing to hear my interactions. But I have no problem interacting should that be the case. So with that, I would appreciate us keeping on time so we can get through the whole second round. Mr. Berthold, 5 minutes à vous, permis la présidence.
Merci.
Monsieur Mr. Blair, what Canadians are seeing, listening to the committee right now, is a ping-pong match between you, the director of CSIS, your deputy minister at the time, and no one wants to take responsibility for what happened. I have a memo here that goes back to the 31st of May 2021 that clearly says that it has to be given to the to Michael Chong and to another member that I will table this after this, Madam Chair. This memo was sent to the members of the committee. You say that 2 years later, in May 2023, that MP Chong and his colleague were targeted by the regime in Beijing. So do you have confidence in Mr. David Vignon, the head of CSIS?
Avez-vous en votre possession
Do you have in your possession any information that would allow you to question his credibility?
Oh, I have a great deal of respect for Director Vignon.
Reconnaissez-vous avoir dit à ce comité le 1er juin
Do you recognize that on the 1st of June you said to this committee, and I'm quoting you, that CSIS determined that the information could have been transmitted, and he determined that it was not necessary that I be informed of it. Do you recognize that you said that the 1st of June?
Assumed that if the director did not share information with me, then he didn't require that I say it.
Vous avez été pourtant très précis en disant il a déterminé qu'il n'était pas nécessaire
But you said clearly that it wasn't necessary that I be informed the 1st of June, and now you're saying you assumed he said that. On the 13th of June 2023, the director of CSIS said to the committee that, as I mentioned earlier, CSIS and I specifically, and so David Vignon himself and myself sent the information to the Minister of Public Safety, telling him very clearly to communicate this to the minister. So are you challenging Mr. Vignon's testimony?
All I can say with absolute certainty is that it was never shared with the minister, me, at the time. And so and again, I don't question what Director Vignon's intention was, but the execution was unsuccessful because that information was never shared with me.
Personne est responsable de rien, M. Blair. C'est encore
Nobody's responsible for anything. Once again, Mr. Blair and Mr. Vignon was clear what he said, and you said clearly what he was to receive or not. Mr. Stewart, who was the deputy minister at the time, Rob Stewart said to us that the minister's briefing was done by the director, and it's to the up to the minister and director to decide what the issues of concern are at the time. So it's Mr. Stewart speaking. I'm not responsible for that. So I asked him the question to understand well. What you just said is that it's up to the minister to decide what briefings he wants to receive or not. And Mr. Stewart said, absolutely. So, Mr. Blair, did you not accept the briefing from the director of CSIS, Mr. David Vignon? If you're not challenging his credibility currently, why are you denying your responsibility in this whole affair?
Bertolo, again, you're mischaracterizing what happened. I was never offered a briefing from the director on this matter. That information was never shared with me, and unfortunately, I learned about it when it was reported in the Globe and Mail. And so, although I don't question at all the credibility of the director of CSIS, I can tell you absolutely, uncategorically, that information was never shared with me. I was never aware that it even existed. And finally, most importantly, it was not a question of if the director had secret information that he felt I needed to see. Frankly, it was his responsibility to alert me to that. He could have called me. He could have sent me an email. He could have come over and seen me, as he had done in every other case. That did not happen in this case. That information was never shared with me.
You did not ask for a briefing specifically at that point in time? So according to you, the whole problem that you weren't informed is on the back of the director of CSIS. That's exactly what you said. And from the beginning of my testimony, all I've been doing is quoting different participants in this, and I'm using their very own words of the people who came here. The minister's words, the words spoken by the director of CSIS, the words of the deputy minister of public safety, and all of those words bring us to one person who's responsible for not having received the briefing. That is to say you, or someone very close to you in the cabinet. Mr. Blair, why have you failed so miserably to receive this information, which has caused damage to our colleague Michael Chong? 30 seconds to you, Minister Blair, without interruption.
Told just what everything you said was incorrect. The bottom line is I had no idea this information existed. The director of CSIS did not tell me he had information that he wanted to share with me. I did not have an opportunity to make a decision whether I would be briefed on it because I did not know it existed until it was reported in the paper. CSIS has a lot of secrets in their possession. They decide what the minister needs to see, and in this case, they may have intended it, but they did not take the steps necessary to bring it to my attention.
Thank you. Monsieur Lauzon, 5 minutes. Permis la
Mr. Lauzon, 5 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair.
But I used to speak to you in English, but today I will ask my question in French. But I will speak slowly.
Mr. Blair, you know, we know the questions that have just come from the Conservatives are trying to undermine your credibility. But for the record of this committee, I'd like to ask a few questions. And with all of the experience that you have and all the service you've given to the people of this country, 39 years as the Chief of Police of the City of Toronto, all the positions you've held since that time, I've had the opportunity to know you over those years, especially from 2010 and on. So as an officer, then following that as the Chief of Police, you've always been in the forefront of maintaining public confidence. That is how we know the Honourable Bill Blair. So in light of the allegations that may be made concerning the intimidation campaign, could you, for the record of this committee, explain to the members how your commitment in terms of transparency and public service have guided your actions, and that how it is only after the fact that you learned this news after the 1st of May 2023. It's impossible to ask for a briefing before one even has the information in hand. So could you talk to us a bit about your experience and your transparency?
Much, Mr. Lauzon. First of all, just as a point of clarification, I was not the chief in Toronto for 39 years, but only for 10. I actually began as a constable, and I held every rank in the Toronto Police Service before becoming its chief in 2005. I appreciate your remarks, and I thank you for that. I spent most of my life trying to keep Canadians safe. And in the various jobs that I've held, and not just as the chief of police or as a minister of this government, but in a number of other fairly significant roles dealing with national security issues and organized crime matters, I've had to deal with very confidential, secret information. I've also been one of the people that was involved in collecting such information, and so I know some of the risks that people who do that work face every day. And so it has always given me an appreciation of the importance of intelligence work. But I think it's important to recognize what intelligence is. First of all, there's just an enormous amount of information that people can have access to. Some of it's open source, some of it's online, some of it's from human intelligence sources, some of it's maybe signals intelligence. There's just a cacophony of information. The role of an intelligence officer is discernment, is to look at that information and to analyze it, to assess the credibility of its source, how it was collected, what the motive of the person providing that information might be, and then to determine through analysis what they believe is happening. And the purpose of intelligence is to inform action. It really is to help decision makers determine whether or not a criminal investigation should be done, whether there should be action taken, for example, to address a security concern or a public interest concern. And so that's the work that I've been involved in most of my life. And I think it's important to acknowledge the importance of that intelligence function, but also its limitations. It's not evidence, it's not proof of what's happening. It's just a really strong indication of that government's police services public needs to be able to act upon. I've also always believed that, though I've lived in and worked on the edge of a secret world or in a secret world for a very long time, we should always err on the side of being as transparent with the public as possible. And our first priority has to be the safety of Canadians. And so all of that is to say that with respect to this information, I thought it very regrettable that information was not shared with me when it was first collected about a threat to a parliamentarian, because I would have, quite frankly, insisted upon very assertive action taken in order to provide that individual with all of the information and support that they needed to be safe and to protect their families from that concern. And we've now subsequently taken steps to make sure that is taken in actioning as well. I think there are real opportunities for Canada to improve its response to foreign interference and the threat of hostile activities of state actors and non-state actors to better utilize national intelligence security information. We have extraordinary people, really credible and great people working for us, but it is our responsibility to make sure that we create the best public value for that huge investment in the collection of that intelligence, and that we use that intelligence in an appropriate way to take the actions that are necessary to look after Canada's interests and to protect Canadians.
Thank you. Madame Goudreau, 2 minutes et demie.
Madame Goudreau, 2.5 minutes. 2 questions. My first one, when we were talking about the culture of information and the measures that were taken recently. But once again, yesterday, and now I say, Madam Chair, that it's through the media that we are informed. Yesterday, I'm reading this, that we learned that there was a rapid response mechanism that had intercepted videos, these deep fakes that manipulate Canadians on social media, creating comments that aren't made by the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition, for example. So the media informed us of this. So my question is, are we equipped to face this?
The media, I'm sure you read it in the media, so did I. But the information actually came from Global Affairs Canada and from the Minister of Global Affairs. That was that information. That was the source of that information. It was a result of a release that came out of GAC in order to inform Canadians.
Bravo.
Wonderful. Are we equipped to face everything that's happening with deep fakes?
And I would suggest to you that we we're subject to misinformation, disinformation, illicit cyber activity. There are constant attacks on Canadian systems, Canadian values, Canadians, and we need to continually get better at this. And so we see these attacks. Some of them are denial of services against government institutions. There's attacks on media. There's attacks on our academic institutions, on critical infrastructure in this country. I think we work very robustly, and I think in many areas of Canada, our response is quite appropriate and adequate. There are other areas because the bad guys are innovating constantly, which means we have to innovate constantly as well in order to be ready to respond.
Tout à fait. Je suis tout à fait d'accord.
Quite right. I agree with you entirely. It goes very quickly, my time. In terms of artificial intelligence, indeed, since the spring, you talked about measures. Can you identify a few for us? Tell us a few things that have been put forward since.
Well, just to be clear, a few things. You mean work that we have been doing?
Dire, dans tout ce qui est ingérence.
Yes, in the area, in terms of interference, foreign interference.
Of course, there's a number of things. I will tell you, one of the areas that I'm responsible for is the Cybersecurity Center, which is run by the Communications Security Establishment. I was over to see them yesterday. They're doing some really outstanding work in order to protect Canadian interests and to thwart the constant attacks. There's
Thank
also
you.
legislation before Parliament. We
Thanks.
can talk about another time.
We look forward to it. Mrs. Blaney,
Monsieur le ministre peut déposer les mesures
to just provide us a list of the measures that we're taking, and we would welcome that within our binder at a time convenient. So we welcome to that. Thank you. Mrs. Blaney, 2.5 minutes.
Well, thank you so much, Chair. So I want to ask the minister if he could share a little bit about, since he's now defense minister, what did you carry from this experience to this new role that you play? And what steps have you taken to ensure that intelligence from DND is properly disseminated to Global Affairs Canada?
Actually, the relationship between not just D&D and global affairs, but it includes obviously public safety. There are a number of different areas of government, and I might even suggest whole of government implications for the work that they're doing. And so I have been involved in, I'm briefed, as I've already mentioned to you, quite robustly and vigorously by our intelligence people, by the Chief of Defense, and by the Chief of Communications Security Establishment. We look at through all of those briefings with lens about what does everyone else need to know, and what can we make public in order to protect Canadians. For example, just on the weekend, I had asked for a very robust analysis of some information that I asked CFINCOM, the Canadian Forces Intelligence Command, to do an analysis and to produce a public-facing document so that we could share information with Canadians that, frankly, Canadians needed to know, and they needed to know from a credible source. They needed to know from a trusted source. And so I asked them to produce that information, and I released that publicly and had them release it. I commented on it, but they released it because I wanted that information to be made available to Canadians and to every department of government so that all of us could have the same basis of information for which decisions can be drawn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all my questions.
I know people don't say it often, but you're wonderful, Madame Blaney. Thank you so much for that. We will now head to Mr. Cooper, followed by Mr. Garretson before we let the minister go on his way. Mr. Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Minister, did your Chief of Staff, Zita Stravis, read the issues management note, which was also sent to her?
No. My understanding is no.
Okay.
I wouldn't testify for her, but I asked, and she said no.
Okay. Thank you very much. Minister, through you, Madam Chair, you have had a history over the last 2 meetings that you have appeared before this committee in providing inaccurate testimony. On June 1st, you said that the issues management note was withheld by you as part of an operational decision by CSIS, which you now concede is not the case, that there was an intent that you see that issues management note. You said in answer to a question that I posed to you, that the issues management note had not been sent to you, even though I have a redacted copy of the issues management note that clearly indicates that it was sent to you. The fact that you didn't read it, the fact that it went into a big black hole, is an entirely different matter, Minister. And Madam Chair, Minister, you seem to make a big deal about accessing a secure terminal. You cited that this would have been transmitted to a secure terminal in the Deputy Minister of Public Safety's office. Can you confirm that your office and the Deputy Minister's office, at which this secure terminal is located, are at the 19th floor of 269 Laurier?
I don't know where the secure terminal is, but Mr. Cooper, if I wrote you a letter and wrote your name on the letter and then put it back in my briefcase and never told you the letter existed and never showed it to you and didn't give you access to my briefcase, I think we could assume that you didn't know that I'd written you the letter.
Minister, you mean to tell me you don't know where the secure terminal is on the same floor as your office in the Deputy Minister's office? How is that an answer that lends itself to confidence on the part of Canadians that you had a grip on fulfilling your responsibilities and receiving information, in this case, on a matter of high importance involving a member of Parliament who was being targeted by Beijing? Really, Minister?
Yeah, really, Mr. Cooper. Really, Mr. Cooper, that office was not, that terminal is on the other side of the building. I do not have access to it. I do not have any access to it, and I don't know precisely where it's located because, frankly, if I knew where it was located, I might have been given access to it.
Well, Minister, I'm glad you've now discovered where it is. But Minister, had you not thought to go down the hall? You talk about this expectation, an expectation that led to this issues management note going into a big black hole. Had you directed your officials to bring to your attention issues management notes on matters of high importance that were addressed to you? Did you ever instruct them to bring those memos to your attention? I mean, how is it possible? I mean, how can you be told? Do you have to be told to read documents that are sent to your attention? Do you have to be told by officials before you bother to do so?
Mr. Cooper, just to be really clear, I have to be advised that there's a memo that needs to be read, and it was not in this case. The director did not advise me in every other circumstances, and I had that job for 2 years. In every other circumstances, the director would notify my office that he had top secret information that he needed to convey to me. He would convene a meeting that I would attend in a secure facility, and that information would be shared. That did not happen in this case. And there were a few other occasions, twice, by the way, in that month, where I was actually asked to go down to the Toronto office. That, again, that information was not shared. And so I have no way of asking or demanding to see a note I don't know exists.
Minister, does your staff have to tell you to read your emails? Does your staff have to tell you to check your text messages? I mean, right here, it was sent to you. Now, Minister...
And Mr. Cooper, you're confused to what it is.
I'm pausing. I don't know about the intentions of any member, but I will tell you that I am the child of immigrants, and when we're talking about the security of our country and we're giving addresses and we're giving information, I question some of what we're doing right here. And I'm here on a question of privilege, chairing the Procedure and House Affairs Committee, because one of my fellow colleagues, who I might not share a political stripe with, was concerned about their safety. The House of Commons, the Speaker, sent this to our committee to do this work. And I take this very seriously, and you could hear it in the tremor of my voice. I have experienced stuff in this country that I hope nobody else has to. And I will just say, as honorable members, and by default of being elected, we are honorable members, be mindful as to the work we are doing and why we are doing it. So I'm going to resume this committee, but I will say, remember why we're here, and let's not be short-sighted.
Minister, do you accept the principle of ministerial responsibility? And absolutely, and consistent with that, do you accept that the buck stops with you as minister? Not your officials, not the director of CSIS, with you.
I believe in responsibility, and I believe taking responsibility means fixing things that don't go well in your department. And in this case, that information was not shared, and it should have been. And so steps have been taken now to remedy that.
And you have spent this entire meeting throwing the director of CSIS under the bus, throwing your deputy minister under the bus. Everyone is responsible but you, Minister. Minister, you failed, and you failed colossally.
Mr. Cooper, I simply disagree with your characterization. I have not throwing anyone under the bus. I'm explaining what happened, and in this case, what did not happen that should have happened.
The beep didn't happen, but the time did come up. I was like, my clock's at 5:11, but there was a beep. We are going to do the last 5-minute round for anybody who helps function the House of Commons. We'll go about 4 minutes over past the 1 o'clock hour. 5 minutes to you, Mr. Gerritsen, through the chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Allow me to read what Mr. Blair said on June the 1st in the PROC meeting, because it wildly differs from the characterization the Conservatives are trying to attribute to what Mr. Blair said. He said, "Allow me to clarify that the information was not shared with me. It was authorized by CSIS to be shown to me, but they determined I would leave that question as one that perhaps you might want to put out to the director. The director determined that it was not information the minister needed to know, so I was never notified of the existence of the intelligence, nor was it ever shared with me." That's what Minister Blair actually said, despite the fact that Mr. Cooper would like to suggest that there's something else going on there. So, Minister Blair, when you say I was authorized for it to be shown to me, but it's not something that you actually looked at. Put this into context for us. How many documents are you authorized to see versus how many do you actually see?
It's impossible for me to give you an answer to that, unfortunately, Mr. Gerritsen. But in these circumstances, I only became aware, actually, Mr. Johnson showed me a document when I went and spoke to him that had my name on the address list. It was the first time I was ever aware of the existence of the document.
Sorry, but just, is it safe to say that you're authorized to see a lot of stuff that you don't end up seeing? Like, is that not a safe assessment?
Well, it's stuff, but let me be really clear, because I'm sure my name gets put on a lot of things, but this is a top secret document. Right. It's a top secret document, and although it's not just a mail list, it's who is authorized to see something. But there's a difference between the director determining that the minister is authorized to see this, and then taking the steps that would have been necessary to actually make that possible.
I'm not going to lie to you, like the last meeting that we had, the characterization from Conservatives about you was that you lost a password or you forgot a password to an email address, and that's why you didn't see it. That's silly? Is that what you're saying?
Silly.
So I want to go back to something else that you talked about previously, and I don't know if it was in your opening statements or something that in response to your question, but you said that you sent a letter to all MPs in 2021 about possible threats. Can you expand on that? Just quickly, what the letter was about?
Yeah, first of all, it was in response to an issue that was tabled before Parliament. And in response, I responded with a 12-page document. In that document, I also was concerned because I was talking about foreign interference, and particularly I wanted to be very explicit to warn my fellow parliamentarians about the threat that the People's Republic of China actually represented. And in that document, I actually referenced the PRC 7 different times in that document, because I thought it was really important that all parliamentarians have that understanding. I was concerned, obviously, about foreign interference, and I think we all have now become concerned with it. But at that time,
you brought it to people's attention. You were trying to signal it.
Let
me ask you, Mr. Blair, how many MPs replied to that, or how much correspondence did you receive back as a result of that?
I actually mailed a copy to everyone, because I didn't.
You mailed a copy to every MP?
Every single one.
How many MPs replied to you?
None.
None. You sent out a letter warning MPs as minister to all 338 MPs, and not a single one replied to you?
That's correct.
Thank you.
So, okay. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that exchange. Minister Blair, I do want to say to you and your team, when committee determined who needs to come for this final round of witnesses on this question, your team was one of the first to respond, and I really do want to just appreciate your availability and your efforts. And I do see Madame Gaudreau's hand up really quick.
C'est simplement pour le dépôt des documents.
It's just for the tabling of documents as quickly as possible, please.
The request of documents we would like from yourself, and that would be greatly appreciated. Mrs. Romanado.
Further to that, Madam Chair, perhaps it would be helpful if we table with the committee the letter of December 18th that members seem to have not or didn't respond to. So maybe it'd be helpful for the members to have another copy of that.
Do we want to have the letter added to our binder? Sure. Perfect. We'll have that added in. With that, have a great day, Minister Blair, and to all members. See you on Thursday. Keep well and safe. We will have the Honourable Aaron O'Toole joining us for 2 hours of testimony as members have requested. Thank you and have a good day. Meeting adjourned.